right? And I'm gonna explain us through why I have posted, not exactly why. And for these times, I really wanted my podcast to be fine. And I have had problems now on my Castbox podcast for a few months or so, or for a month or so. And while the information comes, like sometimes you just want to do a podcast, and like sometimes you just want to do a podcast the way that we have introduced ourselves on social media, with every communication, with every room, with every part of a vote business, with everything that humanity finds themselves busy within their day. And such is our education, since such has been explained to the function of humanity itself. And when we explain it in how I explain my AWOKH business, and in my AWOKH business, I communicate in a time that I feel fine. I communicate in a way that I feel fine. I communicate in an explanation that to me is a fine explanation. I communicate at a pace that is fine for me. I communicate in all the different ways and colors of communication. And when I've educated to the whole social media teams that this is how I, Rabia Elise, function in my AWOKH business, and you require social media to really respect how you communicate, where you're communicating from, how you reason when you communicate, because not everyone in every communication is gonna realize who's Rabia Elise in all of the communications and explanations that I've educated on social media. And at such a time, you want your podcast to be functional so that you can now hide behind that room, and so that you can now really explain the situation and what you are explaining without people now ripping you apart about it while they're having to listen to what it is that you're explaining. Sorry for that. I'm just really in a place where there's so much happening amongst humanity. And I really feel that when there's so much happening, when it forms part of everyone's day, that everyone is trying to fix what is happening, and when everyone the whole time want to tell someone that I'm fixing whatever is happening and required, and that I really don't need to listen to you and to look at how the world are looking, then you really require the world to logically listen, to logically reason, and to logically function that is the logical function that I'm going to explain to us now. And when I explain us through the logical functioning of humanity, and whoever is missed on my podcast that does not now have give me the permission to really share it with the podcasters who is really pressed played on every podcast. Last year and the year before, there was about 600 people that pressed played, because there's information that certain people sometimes find themselves managing those processes amongst humanity, and they know where they're at in the management of those processes, and they sometimes require the information, and they can't the whole time argue with officers, they can't the whole time argue with business owners, they can't the whole time argue in wars and aggressions to explain that this is how the earth functions, and they sometimes just require the information in a way that is fine, and in a way that we as humanity release the information to whoever listens and whoever is managing the functioning process of humanity on earth. And under that function, I'm now going to explain a post that I've just said on my purpose serving page, right? And on my AWOKH Facebook page. Only, and when I say a certain page, I've mentioned before that I sometimes only require the people that really know what you are talking about. How Facebook works in the world is when you go press and play on a Facebook video, and people press or play on a Facebook post, or they look at a Facebook post, then they exactly understand and listen and accept the information, and whatever happens to the information is whatever happens to the information amongst humanity. And such is our businesses and my business, and how I relay my information on my social media pages. And therefore, I want everyone to listen, not in a way that they're so used to shutting someone down when someone explains something, but to listen in the logical way of listening and functioning of humanity on this earth and in all of the functionings of the universe. The 1+1 function that I've explained. Where the human brain functions from in the universe, how I know the information, logical way of listening to what are humanity finding challenging on the earth in this season. And that's where I'm explaining from. I'm only explaining from the logical way of listening, the logical way of functioning, the logical way of sensing what is happening amongst humanity, and how does we as human beings deal with what is happening amongst humanity. And my logical way of explaining it is on this earth, we are the human beings. And in the universe, there's communication of television and of social media. And but I need people to listen to what I say rather than sucking the words out. And when you read that next to the human brain communication is the mathematical, scientifical, technological function of the human functions and communications that includes every implementation that we implement on Earth. And when humanity has learned that, and for years people have been functioned on machines, and they're having to function on the normal pace of the natural force of the universe. And some machines can now have the human brain of someone function like a machine person. Why? Because technology stands hand in hand next to the human brain communication in the universe. And where technology stands hand in hand like a left hand and like a right hand process. In the human brain communications of the human functioning on the satellites and by the stars where the communication comes from. The requirement for us to learn that the pace that we are moving at in our generation is the pace of a technological functioning. And when every communication that we receive as human beings functions through the technological function, then it's gonna oppress us, it's gonna aggress us, it's gonna require us to say information in a way that we are not used to. It's gonna require information to come through the way that it wants to, because it functions under the complete process of every country and of the internationalness of every communication that the human being functions on, and that the years of receiving and of releasing information has been functioned on in the universeness of communications. And when we as human beings functions under the complete process of technology, technology takes control and technology walks with us. And my sister Antoinette takes a walk and she walks and she's on a gym and she walks, and sometimes you don't realize that you are walking at an odd time and it's maybe a different time and it's maybe this and that, and you find yourself functioning under the technological function of the human brain. And we learn that the technological function of the human brain is sometimes required in your office day. That is a Monday to a Friday, and from a 9 p.m. in the morning until a 5 p.m. in the afternoon. And while you still function after 5 p.m. under the technological function that is standing next to the human brain function, there is now also the cell phone communication sometimes. But there's a difference between the cell phone and between the office environment. And when the pace of you are sometimes in a way that you are sometimes on a pace of technology, then you're gonna get information that keeps you hand in hand with the pace of technology. And then I learned that my sister was drinking a cup of coffee, and the coffee was now sometimes for me too much, because I realized that she now receives information that goes hand in hand with our generation that drinks a cup of coffee, and the coffee keeps us in that. That is the one communication for us to realize that humanity can function and we are functioning and all of that, but logical ways that there's processes that people are managing, and there's an office time, and there's the time that people needs to function in their logical functioning. And that such processes are managed by human beings on earth. And that when I explain us through this, I explain us through it based on my womb education that I found myself born in. And when I switched on, like I explained on my page the other day, it's like when I switched on the Braxton family values, and the mother looks like Mama Anna Philander, and they explain me through the process, then I exactly listen to where do I find myself at in the communication of that, and where do our household find ourselves at in the communication of that we sometimes find ourselves in our normal working day, and we don't realize that the communication includes so much communications and processes. And on that post, I mentioned something very logically explained to me. in a logical way of the 1+1 function of humanity, the mathematical function that humanity was educated about, that functions, and the simplest explanation of how humanity can explain themselves through the process and how humanity can learn to function next to technology and even be fine on that day. And under the mathematical function, we learn the plus one. And the 1+1 is the most logical way that we can sometimes explain ourselves through the process, and the people that are managing and that are fixing and that are having to keep the technology and technology side and the human communication on the human communication side. And there's no wrong between the communications of it, but it can have us be on that day in a way that we sometimes have to say, now I have to logically reason and listen to what is it that I sometimes find myself having to respond to in my day. And when Arabia Elise explain us through the requirement and the response, that you are required to listen to yourself. And everyone says that they know about the process. In South Africa, reasons that they are functioning on the process. And South Africa runs next to me the whole time. And I realize that they know what they are doing and they had inside information about it. But they are sometimes in my way because I really don't know anything about the process of how the human functions. And that every time that I found myself almost in that process of being the center of everyone's communication, then everyone sometimes so much keep me in that the prisoners find themselves imprisoned years after years and generations after generations of people. And when you sometimes have to explain to everyone step aside with the process because we cannot run in front of one another with the communication. So if we know about the communication, then we do not treat someone else that really doesn't know about any of these processes in a way that might sometimes be harmful or endanger to that person. And if all of South Africa knows about the process already, I always say, then quickly just step aside. Because I really don't know what everyone knows about the process of the human functioning and of all the discussions that everyone have about everyone on earth. And the most interesting things that people have listened to and have communicated about the functioning of us on earth. And under the logical explanation of the mathematical function in the universe, the scientific way of reasoning of the scientific explanations are exactly every part of our human reaction. And I call it our walk, our talk, our attitude. And in our walk, our talk, our attitude, we scientifically also listen, even if I say I haven't been to the scientific class, I haven't been to the mathematics class, then in logical explanation, then under the technological function of the human brain communication in technology, and under the human brain communication of the logical functioning on earth, the 1+1 function where mathematics derives from is where the process gives way so that every human being can find themselves fine through the process for many years and generations of time. And when the people that manages the process receives the information, then they manage it in a way that is the 1+1 factor. That is not when this house is struck down, then we go and chase a Mama Anna Philander's house down. Not when the Humbabahanis chase one another, then they chase the Humbatanis about it, but in a logical way of the 1+1 function, meaning that the system that is technology runs scientifically with a scientific mindset and with a scientific way of reasoning, and the scientific of reasoning cannot directly stand next to the human brain function of the complete communication process. And when the people that works on these engineering processes works on it, then they need to be on the 1+1 fit, not keeping I call it on Facebook, the dress and the undress process in one house, because then we deal with a lot of things on earth. There is a dress and an undress process at one time. It cannot function at the same time. Because the moment someone dresses someone, then Rabia says, yo, I feel so undressed and so oppressed and so abused, because the dress and undress function is now functioning, the technological function and the human communication is functioning under the people that are managing the process. And then I look at the Tamar Braxton so, and I look at our Mama Anna Philander's house, and I learned that the functioning cannot be an address and undress communication at the one time and the same pace. Because then I will be talking the whole day and I will be making podcasts about everything in the universe. So the dressed and undressed communication, the 1+1 function. The time that you dress someone, South Africa says to one another, let's dress Antoinette and Rabia. Let's undress Antoinette and Rabia. The dress and undress function has had many communications about these processes, and I don't know what they have communicated about, but they call it a dress and undress. And in the meantime, they all run around us in all of these communications in person, and we don't realize it because our parents do not know and have not had all the informations of all of these communications that the human functions on. And on the time that I was direct on my social media page, I was direct to say that whoever has had information, just stand a little bit aside and allow our household to listen to what it is that we are required to listen to under these communications. And my explanation now to the engineers working on the function is the dress and undress communication cannot run under the one communication. Then when the human being and the cell phone are different, the cell phone is with the human being, but the brain communication is a different communication. And you get that communication process to scientifically fix it, like the science class that sometimes knows what they're doing and sometimes they don't know, and someone says, but don't pull the plug out, otherwise all the electricity is going to be off. And when people don't know what I'm talking about, and no one can do something about what I'm saying, but the people who realize what Rabbi Ali are saying, then the function is under the 1+1 mathematical functioning of the technological, scientific, educational function of the human communications. And on that communication, I'm going to let us listen further and let us explain this process to whoever is managing it in a way that they realize everything that I'm explaining to them. And now some of them are going to say that they've already listened to it. And someone has already said it. But when you completely listen to all that I'm saying, and then you're going to completely realize and know how are we going to get the human brain function based on the communication in the universe, and the technological function based on technology, based on the education function, based on the houses built, on the offices built, on everything, on the parliamentary educations, and based on the sometimes scientific communication that sometimes becomes one with science. And when science happens in the classroom, science happens. And not everyone wants to be in that classroom, because I really didn't know I wanted to be in the science classroom. That's all I wanted to say about that. And I really didn't want it to be in the mathematical classroom, only because of the logical way of how we're going to listen to this, and how is humanity going to fix this, so that no one runs in front of no one, and so that everyone finds himself still fine and every day. No one gets paranoid when they hear about all of these communications, and everyone still finds himself fine where they're at in how the processes are being rectified, where the processes are being rectified or rightified or leftified amongst humanity. Other than that, that's all I wanted to say about the process. Have an interesting day further.